Welcome to the Environmental Justice Lab. I am your host, Dr. Leslie Joseph. Thank you so much for being with us because we are back once again with Kibri Hutchison Everett. Kibri, how are you doing?
I'm doing good on this, very nice, not too hot summer day.
Nice. So we've been talking about the issues kind of in the Carolinas where we're from, different things that we've seen, things that you've been involved in, that you've worked on specifically. Now I want to transition to one of the big things that we talked about before we started the interview and while we were kind of here discussing it, and that's the trash pile. The trash pile in Rock Hill. Can you tell us what that is and how it came to be, the trash pile?
Right. Yes, yeah. And the trash pile probably is not the politically correct term, but that is the term that we, Black residents anyway, in Rock Hill, refer to it as. So the trash pile is actually a neighborhood. It's a neighborhood on the southern part of our hometown, Rock Hill, South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And it is the site of a former landfill. I'm not sure of the years, but I think the landfill existed through the 90s, I want to say, early 90s, maybe. I don't know when it started. But anyway, the city of Rock Hill decided to dump their trash in this area, in this neighborhood where people were living, on this large parcel of land that wasn't lined. There was no lining. So it was just a surface landfill. You, Leslie, probably know what the proper correct term, but it was an unlined landfill, which is problematic for multiple reasons, which I'm sure you can explain better than me.
Yeah.
But essentially, this is the trash pile is and was a very poor neighborhood in the southern part of town that through racist practices did not have services. So you might think, oh, this must be way out in the sticks of South Carolina somewhere. No, it is not. It's right off of a major highway in our town. But this area, just like where I grew up in my street, and which actually was common, and I guess still is common. But these areas where Black people lived, also largely in the South, especially, did not have city services. So even the street I grew up on, I mean, is also not in the middle of nowhere. It's right in town, but we did not have city water. We didn't have trash pickup. And if you look at a lot of policy that has existed, especially in the South, you'll see that Black areas were often excluded from these city services. So where I grew up, we were on well water. And like I mentioned, we didn't have, city services. So same thing for the trash pile. Trash pile, they didn't, the people who lived there did not, have running water or sanitation.
Wow.
So yes, and that is still the case there. So the city has not brought the infrastructure to this area of town. And in addition to that, they were dumping their trash there in this neighborhood for years in an unlined landfill. So that is what the trash pile is.
Okay, so, okay, I didn't know all of that. So the trash pile, I guess my first question is, did the people living there name it that?
I'm guessing so. I need to ask my aunt because she grew up there. My uncle's wife grew up there. But, all throughout high school, I mean, that's all I knew it as the trash pile. So I'm guessing so. I'm guessing. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so right now, currently, the trash pile has no city services. They have no sanitation services.
Running water.
And they have no waste pickup either. Nobody gets to take the trash from the neighborhood either. Just nothing.
No. Correct. Yeah, no services at all. And there's a nonprofit, I want to give them credit, called A Place for Hope, who's tried for many years, decades, to help the residents there. And honestly, there aren't a lot of residents who live there currently because of lack of services. But there are still a few. But the Place of Hope, they're a nonprofit. They ended up setting up through funding. They fundraised and they set up like a mobile unit, like a trailer. And the trailer provided bathrooms for the residents. It provided, washing machines and dryers for them to wash their clothes, and also showers. And so residents from the trash pile neighborhood were and are using this mobile unit to use the bathroom and take a shower. Now, this particular mobile unit is currently, when I went last year, it's in disrepair. It's full of mold. The floors are falling in. And so they're trying to raise more money. But I mean, the sad part is, it's good that there aren't a lot of people in the trash pile. The trash pile is composed of about 160 parcels, very small parcels of land. And I want to mention that the main street was called Blackman Road. There are two main streets. One is Blackman Road, and the other is Joe Louis Boulevard, which makes me proud that they named it, after a prominent Black hero, Joe Louis. But it's about 160 parcels. I'm not sure how many, maybe 10% of those are occupied currently. But this is an area where, Black owned land. But the residents, the landowners, they can't really do anything with the land. One, because, who knows what contamination exists. If you drive through the neighborhood, the trees do not look healthy. So I don't know what that might be an indication of, but yeah, they're just if you can't use the bathroom, you can't wash your hand, or take a shower, of course, you're not going to stay there. And so It's a pretty desolate neighborhood currently.
Oh my goodness. And just for the listeners, many of you listening, I've talked about landfills before in the past, but just so we can kind of get our bearings, when Kibri talks about an unlined landfill, the idea is that when you have a landfill that's constructed, you will put an engineered liner under it because you want to catch any rainwater, any contamination that might come from the trash itself before it hits the ground. Because once it hits the ground, you're contaminating the soil and potentially the groundwater under the soil, depending on how high the water table is. And so typically, when you design a landfill, you have a nice liner, you have groundwater monitoring wells to make sure the water's not contaminated, and you do air monitoring to ensure that you're actually aware of what's in the air above the landfill to alert people if there's a problem. And so what Kibri's describing is what we would call in the engineering world a dump. It's literally a dump. Like somebody drove up with their dump truck, dumped the trash, and left. And they just kept doing it over and over. It's not a landfill anymore. It's what you do when you live in a place where you don't care about the environment. You just want to get your trash away from your neighborhood. You just go somewhere and dump it. And so when you do that and it rains and that water passes through the trash, it hits the ground, those contaminants hit the soil, hit the groundwater, and now you have a place that is unlivable, uninhabitable. You can't drink the water, you can't breathe, and you don't want to live near a dump. Nobody does. And so it's really unfortunate that this is the place where Rock Hill, where we are both from, decided to dump their trash and leave the residents with nothing. No services, no opportunity to take care of themselves, no protection from the environment, nothing at all. It's a horrible, horrible scenario. And most people would associate this kind of scenario with a very poor developing country, right? That's what you would see in those types of areas where they can't afford to have an engineered line. They can't afford to monitor. They can't afford to provide services, so they don't. This is good old United States of America. This is South Carolina. This is in city limits. There's no reason why this community should be dealing with this in the year 2025. There's no reason for it at all. I just want to put that out there because I don't want there to be any confusion about how horrible this condition is and how unacceptable this scenario is in this community. So let me ask you this then. We're talking about the trash pile. Is this something that you feel like is, I don't know if you would say common? Do you see it often? Are there connections or parallels between how this community has been treated in terms of being managed this way versus other Black communities in South Carolina, across the South? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think this probably is common. I think maybe not necessarily with trash or kind of surface level pollution, but just communities of color being in proximity to pollution in the South, especially.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is commonplace. I was a volunteer community scientist with a group called Concerned Citizens of Cook County, which is in southern Georgia, kind of near Valdosta, Georgia. And they're another example of, a Black, well, it's a small town. All the Black people live on one side of town, which historically was the case in Rock Hill as well. It may
Mm-hmm.
be changing now, but similar situation down in Cook County, Georgia. And all the polluters are, if you drive through this town, you can clearly see the difference. The white side of town is green, paved roads. The Black side of town is where the polluters are. Roads are unpaved. And in this particular town, in the Black neighborhood, there is a polluter that has an open flame going pretty much all day. I don't know what they're doing. I forgot what they're making, manufacturing. Um, and going back to the prison population, what the residents said, they hire people who maybe just gotten out of prison, gotten out of jail. They're putting them in these situations because they
Mm-hmm.
won't speak up. They're not going to complain. So they have those kinds of people working in this particular town at this particular location. But that is just another example where it's not surface level land based pollution, but it's air pollution that's happening
Mm-hmm.
clearly right in the middle of a Black neighborhood. And I think I mentioned too about Sampson County. I haven't been to that landfill, but from what I'm hearing, is a similar situation where the state's largest landfill is right adjacent to a Black neighborhood. And I'm sure there are other examples in South Carolina, but yeah, I mean historically, yeah, I mean that is America. That is, I'm sure people have heard of NIMBY, not in my backyard.
Mm-hmm.
And when people say not in my backyard, it goes to somebody else's backyard, and
That's right.
often those are communities of color.
Yep, that's exactly right. Um, uh, one thing I didn't mention earlier that you brought up, which I appreciate, was we talk about the environment. It's not just the air and water quality. It's like you were saying, there are no paved roads. I imagine there's no parks to play in, no green spaces, no trees, no places to go and just spend time with your families. It really is a desolate, abandoned, we call them sacrifice zones. Like you've sacrificed this part of town for whatever
Yes.
your purpose was. And so that's what we're also seeing when we talk about the trash pile, talk about this areas in Cook County, Dillon, South Carolina. I'm thinking about North Charleston, South Carolina,
Mhm.
parts of rural North Carolina. I mean, this is what we're seeing more and more of. But the good thing is that there are people like you in the world who have the training in the background and who are trying to do something to make change. And so, what you told me before is that you purchased a parcel at the trash pile. And I guess you're going to,
Yes.
I don't know if you're going to move into it, like live there, but what is your plan with this land and what are you trying to accomplish with your work at the trash pile?
Yeah. So yes. Yeah. A parcel became available. It's a very small parcel, so it's only about a tenth of an acre. Which, yeah, the parcel surprisingly at the trash pile are about that size. Most of them. I don't know what the story is on that. I'm sure there's some reason why that's the case too. But yeah, I did recently purchase a parcel there. What I have in mind is having it as an environmental test site.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I mentioned how like the trees there. just shows signs of distress.
Right.
They don't look healthy. So obviously there's something going on under the ground. But I do want to do some, experiments there. I'm not sure exactly what they're going to entail. It could be air, water, soil, all of the above, really, because the trash pile not only is the site of a former landfill, but even to date, there are multiple polluters within a 1 mile radius of the community. So there's like an asphalt mine or a mine of some sort. I can't remember, a rock quarry. I think it's a rock quarry.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple of other kind of chemical plants in close proximity, to the site. So we could do, air quality testing. And of course, I mentioned the water and soil. But the long term, the bigger picture, let's say, we see, we know that there's contamination there. As far as I know, there's never really been any kind of environmental impact studies,
Right.
of the property, of the site there. There's been no reason to, I guess, unless, some developer wants to come along and turn it into something else. And maybe, people at the local government will become interested in trying to do something. But it won't help the native people who are from there, which is often the case. It'll help, big business or some developers. But yeah, kind of the bigger picture in my mind is, we often hear about, Black land loss and how, so much of the land, especially farmland that, Black people had, at the turn of the 20th century, is gone. It doesn't exist in families anymore. And even to date, currently, there's also a severe, housing supply shortage.
Right.
There's just, people need, places to live. Affordability is an issue. But here in this neighborhood of, roughly 150 parcels, largely owned by Black people, the current environmental state of the land doesn't really allow for people to live on the property that they own. So they have this asset, which is land, which we all need, and they can't do anything with it, because, it's contaminated. There's no infrastructure. City services don't exist. And so the idea is to, collect data that can be used, for advocacy purposes, to make the case to city officials, let's say, that it's time to bring infrastructure to this area, so that the people who own land here actually can make use of it. They can build homes and rent them out and create income. So we're trying to think about it from not just an environmental justice, or in my mind, it's not just an environmental justice issue, but it's also an economic justice, because these Black people, they have an asset, but the asset is diminished because of the environmental conditions. What can I do to help them make turn the situation around? And I do that for a lot of the communities I work with. The case of Cook County down in Georgia. So the residents were saying, the pollution is apparent. We see it every day. We want to do something about it. And so they approached, environmental lawyers. Those environmental lawyers were telling them, well, you can't just make a statement that there's pollution here. We need data to back that up.
That's right.
And so that is where, a person like myself comes in to get them the data they need to either sue a polluter or to go to their city council or, local government officials and say, this is the state of contamination. This is what polluters are doing to our community. Here's the evidence, and what are you going to do about it? And so that is what I, see my role as a community advocate or a community scientist, is to play that role, to give them the data and information they need to improve their communities.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I could even see this kind of test area that you've purchased as almost like a training facility as well. Where people can actually come, you can teach them how to do this kind of sampling, how to analyze certain types of data, how to gather information that could be useful in advocating for your own community, wherever you're from, and then showing them the utility of those skills when they go back to wherever they live. So this has the potential to do a lot more for people than just the trash pile only. And so that's exciting to see. I'm excited for you. Hopefully we can think of ways to support your work there. And I don't know if you need to raise money, if you need boots on the ground, if you need equipment, and we can think through and talk,
Yes.
at some point about what that looks like, and hopefully get you back on the podcast to share some of the results and the findings and some of the things that you've been able to determine from the work. That would be really exciting to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for offering. Yeah, I'd say all the above, and getting the community involved. We hear the term community science, and that is a good suggestion, is to get the residents to kind of do their own community science, and that really it brings it home for people when they're hands on. A lot of this stuff is a lot of academics traditionally focus on this kind of work, but when you get local residents involved, they just are more passionate about it, and they actually have a voice in what is happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you think about the work that you've done up until now, this work here, the trash pile you're trying to begin, how does that all connect together, right? Is there a connection between this trash pile work and broader EJ work that you do? Do you see connections between that and some of the things that you're doing through your company? Like, how does this fit into all that Kibri is and represents as a scientist?
Oh yeah, so a great question. Yeah, I think just as I mentioned, broader and holistically, this all is kind of interrelated. I'll be able to take the methodology, or even what I learned from community voice, and apply that to when I work in other communities, and other states, or other countries, even where there are environmental injustices happening. This one is really personal for me because we're both from the town, and again, like you mentioned, it's 2025. Why are there people still living without basic water and sanitation services? So it's definitely personal for me, but it is interrelated with other communities. It can take lessons learned from this exercise, and apply it to other areas. And even as we get down the line in dealing with policymakers, or government officials, just seeing how that process plays out, I think will be beneficial to learning how to work, or make the case to elected officials on how they should improve their planning, so that communities like the trash pile don't get left out, especially with data centers, since that's kind of forthcoming, and becoming more prominent. We don't want to make the same mistakes. It was trash pile, unlined landfills in the 90s, and now 2025 and beyond, data centers might be the thing where underserved communities are bearing the brunt of the environmental injustice. And so 50 years from now, we don't want to be in a neighborhood that was close to a data center, having the same conversation. We want to try and make sure the same mistakes that elected officials made, in places like Rock Hill, this part of Rock Hill, don't happen, in other areas. So it is, very intersectional, and interrelated. This, be a good case study, actually. Because all the different environmental domains are affected. Land, water, soil. So it's a good test site for all of that.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate your willingness to go back home and do work in our fair city. I know you got to go. I don't want to spend up too much of your time. You got things to do, people to train, environments to protect. But I do want to just mention, because I keep saying it all the time, and I never have actually done it. But I tell people all the time, hey, go back to where you're from, go back to your communities, take a look around, see what's going on, how you can invest yourself with your talent and your time to make those environments better, instead of just opining about the state of the world. We all have an opportunity to make our own spheres healthier and more livable and equitable. and you're doing that. And it just so happens you're doing it where I'm from. And so I really appreciate that. And I'm so glad that someone as skilled as you, as experienced as you, is going back to Rock Hill and making our town just a little bit better. So thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you, Leslie. And yeah, thank you for all you've done as well, at the University of South Carolina and across the state. And I think you still have family in Rock Hill, right, too?
Yep,
So
absolutely.
I think we're doing this for all of them. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so with every guest, I always ask at the very end when we close the episode, if there's anything at all you want us to walk away from remembering or thinking about more closely or reconsidering, because we all have different experiences and different directions in which we engage these issues. And so for you, what would you want the people listening to walk away with when they press stop on this episode?
Great question. I guess to sum it up, I'd say don't blame people for the state that they're in. In a lot of cases, it's really been by design and they've been targeted, like the trash pile, for example. I mean, of course, the city was not going to dump their trash near Winthrop, let's say.
That's right.
So, I mean, that area was targeted and it didn't matter that there were people living right there. So, and the fact that there's no city services, even though, like I said, on my street and at the trash pile, that was also by design. That, a lot of Black communities just didn't have access to services that other parts of the town had access to. So I'd say have compassion for people and for the environment, not just people in the environment. And be vigilant when you see injustice happening. Be an advocate, speak up, and join the fight.
Exactly. So with that, I want to thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you for sharing your time, your talent, your experiences, and your understanding of these issues. We've all benefited greatly from hearing from you and listening to your perspective. So thank you for sharing it.
You're very welcome, Leslie. Yeah, hopefully we can do it again.
No, absolutely. The door is always open. So whenever you got some more information, some more to discuss, send me an email, give me a call. We can make it happen. You're more than welcome anytime on the podcast.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you all for listening. This has been another episode of the Environmental Justice Lab, where we are for the people and the planet. We will see you next time.